This is Artie, and today I'm going to do a tutorial on how to create a simple Canva cover. I will go over some basic design concepts, what Canva is, how it works, show you some stuff that I've done in the past, and then go through a rough breakdown of the process that you can use to create your own cover. This is my way of showing that you do not have to go into debt in order to package your book with a cover that you are proud of. First thing that we need to talk about is what is the actual purpose of a cover? It is much more than just the paper keeping the spine of your book together or a pretty image before the start of your book. It's your marketing tool that helps you both attract and filter readers. Despite the adage, don't judge a book by its cover, people do absolutely judge books by their covers. As such, it is important that your cover looks like you care about the words inside it. It also should identify your genre and ideally the tone of your story. However, a lot of authors, understandably, feel that they need colorful, illustrative covers to do well and be noticeable. That is, however, not true. Even some hugely popular books that went on to be very successful did not have extremely intensive covers when they first came out. I will be breaking down the covers of Red Queen and Bird Box to show you how these covers do their job while remaining very simple in actuality. Now let's talk about what actually is Canva. Canva is an online editing tool that supports images and videos, but obviously we will be focusing more on the former. One big thing to understand is Canva comes with their own library of images that they are allowing you to use to compile your images with commercial rights included. The way it works is artists basically sell their image to Canva for them to then put it into their library, and they get royalties when it's being used. Kind of like Kindle Unlimited, but for artists instead of authors. Another thing to keep in mind is that Canva does have AI features, but not all of them are the evil generative kind. For example, something like the background remover does use a machine learning algorithm to identify what is the background and what is the foreground in order to remove something easily. But it's really not doing anything that an artist wouldn't be doing with Photoshop, just with a lot more buttons. Another thing to keep in mind is artists are being paid in the use of those tools. Every time it's used, a little bit is added to the general pool. Some tools, however, are still very borderline and can be questionable. For example, the style match button that is weird. Technically, if you use it on one design to another, it pays the artist to create the image, but would still be considered generative AI. And so you may want to avoid it. Bottom line is you will need to explore the platform and decide for yourself what tools you believe are within acceptable bounds of using consensual machine learning training to simplify usage and which ones are too generative for your liking. For this tutorial, I will be focusing on some of the simplest features that use no to minimal AI. My advice is to stick to the stock library of graphics and images and the primary tools if you aren't sure. There are plenty enough to create something that looks really good without risking your covering having that generated AI smell to it. You can also use your own images and licensed images that you find on other places, like Pixels, or a cover I'll show you later was put together using images from a public domain archive, for example. So you have plenty of options, and you should be able to create something great. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of the design process itself, I want to talk a little bit about the basics of composition. I'm not going to try to give you an artistic master course over here. Instead, I'm going to give you 3 shortcuts to make your covers look balanced and some other tips and tricks. Your focus for the cover should be the title, subtitle, and author name in that order. This means that the title should almost always be the biggest words on the page, with the subtitle, if any, close behind. Your author name should generally be on the bottom, or small enough to not be obtrusive. I know it might be tempting to put your author name big, bold, and beautiful at the top because you are proud of the work that you've created, which you absolutely should be. You wrote a book. But if you're not an author whose name sells the book, then it is the book and its title that you want to use to sell yourself. So, now on to some general composition rules. The first one you might have actually heard of before because it is a very common piece of advice given in pretty much any visual media. It is called the rule of thirds. And the way that we're going to be using it is we are literally going to take a 3x3 grid and overlay it on top of our cover in order to make sure that our points of interest align with the rule of thirds. That means that all of our biggest elements and most important ones where we want the eye to focus align with either the horizontal or vertical lines, and the most important elements are on the intersection. This will make sure that our composition looks good and interesting. The second one is a little more niche, and it is called the Fibonacci spiral. Now, don't freak out. I'm not trying to hypnotize you. There's a few ways that you can use this. It is actually a very versatile tool. The main one that you are interested, however, is sizing. When you lay over this Fibonacci sequence over your cover, your biggest element should be the biggest subsection of the spiral right here. This goes for the other visual elements on the cover. You can use the same sizing principle, and any curves can follow the curve of the Fibonacci spiral as well. This will make sure everything looks smooth. And last but not least is the composition weight. The big thing to remember with this one is this isn't so much a rule as a tool to use in order to create the right kind of atmosphere for your cover. Generally speaking, compositions that are bottom heavy, meaning that there's a lot going on or there's a lot of emphasis or weight in the bottom black part of this vase type image, will have more stability. They will feel sturdy and therefore create a sense of comfort. On the other hand, compositions that have more stuff going on top will feel like they're almost going to tip right on over. This tends to create a sense of tension or unease. Which one you want to do will depend on the type of story and the type of cover you are trying to create. So a cozy mystery, for example, should probably be more bottom heavy, but a horror book might require a more top heavy composition, so it looks kind of threatening or intimidating. Or you might go for a more balanced composition where it feels like the elements on the bottom and top are roughly equal to each other. This can be in color, size, or general emphasis. And this will make sure that your cover looks more balanced across the board and doesn't lean one way or the other. Basically, what you want to do is overlay these tools on top of your cover when applicable to see if it loosely meets the compositional rules. Now, big thing to remember is it does not have to be completely perfect or exact, but by keeping these in mind, you will basically guarantee yourself that your cover will not look lopsided or draw the eye in an incorrect direction. Now, let's take a look at some of the examples that I mentioned earlier. The first one is the cover of Red Queen, which came out before Powerless and is awesome, and you should read it. But this is literally just a single image and a font. Right? If we overlay the balance vase over here, you can see that this is a balanced composition. It's not really teetering one way or the other. We can also put the rule of thirds on top of it, and you can see how the rule of thirds aligned with the major elements on the cover. As you can see, the Fibonacci sequence also fits really well with how much space the title takes up versus the top image of the crown and the little bestseller subtitle up top. So let's move on to a slightly more complicated example. Bird Box. This is the original cover for the horror book. And although it might look more involved, it actually isn't that bad. And it is definitely something that you can create with Canva. Technically, it is just a font and an image with a texture over it and some very simple, nearly clip art level images on top. But the big thing about it is the contrast and the composition. So firstly, if we lay over the composition vase, you can clearly see that this image is very top heavy, which creates that sense of foreboding. Secondly, you can see the rule of thirds. Again, the main image right here lines up with the rule of thirds. And lastly, the Fibonacci sequence fits with the circle and the birds. As you can see, these carvers are extremely simple, and you can absolutely make them yourself. These are extremely popular books, and they stand out. They do their job. They're plenty effective, but they don't have high production value. What they all share, though, is contrast, an interesting visual that is symbolic, intriguing, and a good composition. So you don't feel like I'm pulling your leg regarding what can actually be made in Canva, I'm going to show you some of the covers that I have made personally. First, here are some of my covers for my fanfics: Soul Trapped, Blood for Freedom, and Imperfect. Then here is a tri-set of covers that I made for my bonus prequel chapters for my debut book, Raisins Found in Promises. And lastly, here are two covers that I made for a fellow author and friend, Camille Spellspire. As you can see, there's a lot of possibilities, and although I'm not going to be going into quite some of the more complicated techniques that you see here, I think what I'm giving you should be enough for you to let your imagination run wild and create something that you will be more than happy to have your name on. Before we finally get into it, a quick disclaimer. I'm going to open an incognito tab and use a completely fresh, non-premium account. I actually pay for the subscription version because I use it every single week to create my Substack graphics and even to compile this video. You may need to pay for it like that. But I will not be limiting myself to the free-only content. That is because this makes Canva far too limited, and this way you can see the real cost at the end of the exported work. I will also only be focusing on creating the front-facing cover. If you're interested in me also doing a full wraparound for a paperback, for example, let me know in the comments and I will go over that in another video. Lastly, you may also be able to use something like the Canva Pro free trial to not have to pay for anything at all, but I will not assume that. All right, let's get started. When you open up Canva after creating your account for the first time, this is roughly the screen that you're going to see. You're going to want to go to Create and type in Cover. This will make sure that you have the right dimensions for most ebook publishing platforms such as Inkitt, Wattpad, Royal Road, and even Amazon KDP. Once you are in here, you will be able to see this is the creative space, and it's already in the right dimensions for us. And this is all of your templates. So you can start with your genre, for example, horror, right? These pretty much make themselves. Some of these are beautiful out of the box. So you can start off. You're going to want to change some stuff, which we'll get into later. But as you can see, there's plenty of options here. You can go with romance. And you can see some nice starts for yourself over here. Or you can even go fantasy. And you can get some of these beautiful images. So a quick note, the ones with the little crown means that they're premium, which means you will not be able to use them out of the box like this. You want to look for specifically the ones without it. If you use the premium subscription or the free trial, you will not have this problem. But even if they are behind a premium paywall, you should still be able to find a lot of these elements and use them in your story. Today we're going to create a cover for my husband's work in progress, which I've created other covers for him, but we're going to create another one today. He's doing a kind of progression fantasy with a mix of Western and wuxia styled worlds. Wuxia basically means that it's a Asian cultivation type theme. So let's see if we can't find something. Well, we'll start with this. And these are mostly food related, but let's see. I like this one. As you can see, we can just skedaddle out of this one. Since it was premium, it gave us others that are like it. And this one is actually not under premium. And I really like the texture of this background, but I definitely don't like the old man. So we can take away this. And this is definitely going to go on the bottom. But this is a kind of base that we can take a look, so we can start with. But let's not stop there. Let's see if we can find some other ones. I also happen to know that there's a dragon in the story, and as you can see, I did do a little bit of searching around off camera. So this is one that I really like. Specifically, I like this little simple filigree thing, and I like the texturing in the back. And the font is a lot nicer than this one. So I think let's see if we can get started with these. I will sometimes pick up to 5 to start off with to combine them. But let's just add another page and go into the elements. Again, I did do a little bit of searching. So these are kind of the Asian styled warriors that we have here, some of which might be interesting for us to take a look at. For example, I did like this one. And this one might be interesting, but it's more feminine. So let's take that one out for now. All right, so let's take a look at some of the other ones that I found. So I did a lantern because I know there's a happens to be a death in the story, and death lanterns are a good representation of that. I did say there was a dragon in the story, so let's take a look if there's any cool dragons that we can find. This is a more Western one. This is a silhouette. I like that. This is really pretty as well. All right. So maybe we can see if there is any kind of buildings or temples. I do like this one. It's a little Torii gate. And there was an image that I liked from the templates that looked kind of like this. Maybe we can find one that looks similar. So you can always click these 3 dots and then say see more like this. And you can see other ones that are similar. So these are, for example, the same style but slightly different shape. There's a really nice one that I think will match our color scheme. And this is a nice corner. The thing with corners is that they add an easy way to create a foreground to your cover, which is why you see them very often. So I literally just tend to hodgepodge a lot of them together like this until I get enough of the ones that I like, and then I will go back to the images that I have. So far, I still really like the background of this, but maybe we can steal some of the texturing for this right here. Right, to make it a little more grungy. Right, so if it's like this, you might need to focus the position, change the position up a little bit. And I did say I like the little filigree here. So let's change that. And we'll change the color to match something on the image. So it gives you these, for example. So you can change it to something that works a little more, maybe more gold. No, I think we'll stick with something like this for now. All right, so we have a little bit of grunginess, a bit of this. I also do like the font better, so we're going to change out the font. So the black doesn't work very well here, so we're going to change it out for... We'll start with the off-white. Also, you don't usually need the written by, so you can just stick with your name. It's the less words, the better, honestly. Makes it stand out and look cleaner. So this is not the actual name, but for anonymity's sake, I'm going to keep it. All right. And lastly, we want a more balanced composition here, so that, because we're not really leaning into cozy, we're not really leaning into ominous, so we kind of want something in the middle. So I also feel like the splatters on one side are nice, so let's see if we can find some more splatters that we can add on right here. Right, do this and change it, and we can again change it to something more in line with what we got going on. So there you go. So a little bit of asymmetry, kind of balance out this with this side a little bit. This is interesting. This kind of almost portal-like situation. I'm not sure about this. Let me create a duplicate in case we know or don't know how we want to deal with this. So maybe we can do this and this. No, softer. There you go. Right. And this is a good opportunity for me to show you how frames work. So you can go to frame, circle frame. And you can go to see all and pull this into your image. And now you can actually put anything inside of this circle and it will only take up this circle. So for example, let's pull one of our elements here that we liked. So say this guy, we can put him right here. And as you can see, he now takes up this circle. We can double click on it and then move him around inside of the circle frame, right? And we can create something like this. So I don't like this guy with this composition because I can see he's transparent, which is actually a problem in this case. So let's get rid of that. So let's see if we can't use anything else. Maybe our dragon. No, maybe the temples that we were looking at before. Because there is a castle that is a big part of the story. So let's look at the graphics. Too cartoony. Could be interesting. So I fast forward a little bit to spare you the searching, but I found this image that, again, I think fits our aesthetic and color palette a lot. So I am playing with it to add it into our circle here in a way that looks nice. Right? So I think we want it a little small as we can get it to show the most. All right, so, and we can kind of line it up with our splatter circle here. Right, and then we can even put this forward in position, right? So this creates this kind of beautiful effect. All right, so that's an interesting option, right? In this case, we're gonna want to make the we're gonna want to pare down a little bit. So let's move this up. Right, so this we're gonna want to delete actually in this case. We're gonna want to do this. All right, so sometimes you're gonna have to work a little bit with the positioning and stuff. And you can get it to look something like that. All right, and then we can create an effect for this. The simplest one is always a nice drop shadow. So you want to increase the transparency and the offset and the blur, and it'll create a kind of lift effect to kind of pop it off the screen a little bit. So this is an interesting version here, this compared to what we have here, right? Or even this one. Now you might even duplicate this one and then get rid of this and then try the element here. Now maybe in this one you do want it black. All right, you want to make it black and do something like this. All right, so that's an option. Now, what if you don't like the kind of portal aesthetic at all, which understandable, right? So we can go back to this version here, and maybe we can try out this and this. That's quite nice. Okay. All right, so I do like this kind of shiny dragon. It's quite simple and striking. Also, let's try it with these branches. Maybe there's something we can do with that. So by themselves, they're kind of busy here, but maybe we can play with the composition a little bit. Right, so bring this up, position, forward, forward. All right, so this by itself could be something, right, if we move it around, but still a little busy, right? So what if we take the more pared down cover that we have here, right, and replace this? So we can delete this and this. And we can probably get rid of this permanently as well. So let's try our branches here. This looks a lot better. This is a nice contrast, right? But I think we don't need it from this side. I think we want to flip it. There you go, right? Fantasy Lord. And we can move this up and forward. So this is looking like a semblance of something. Right, we're going to want to make this a little smaller. Right, so you can see the few options. So I don't think I like this after all here, but I do like this and I like the dragon. So perhaps this, and then let's try the, let's see if we can't find more corners. So ooh, these are very pretty. So this one might do very well. or maybe even something a bit more complex like this or this. Let's try that. All right, so the way that you would do this, flip, whoop, pressing the on it, flip, horizontal. And then you can line it up. All right, this is definitely a start. And then we're going to want to fix the name a little bit. So let's move this here, move that there. Right, so let's move this out here a little bit. So you want it in the middle. I actually think I want to steal this from here again because I like the this typography. So and again, I think we're just going to stick with a simple off-white here. And as much as I like the filigree, I think it's a little busy here. We can probably get rid of it. Yeah. So as you can see, this is already a pretty good start. Let's try out some of our techniques that I showed you earlier. So this is your rule of thirds. We're going to bring it right in. Fill up the cover. And we're going to lower the opacity so we can see more. So first, let's take a look at these. So we have the lineup over here, but let's take a look at our horizontal ones. So the main issue is where our title is. We want it a little higher and probably lower the line spacing a little bit. So lower the line spacing and raise it up a tad, right? So low at the top here would be good, I think, right? So now we have the top of Lord lined up with the line, and then the dragon, it has this kind of horizontal line here. So let's move the dragon up a little bit as well. Boom. All right. So this is a version of a cover, right? We can add a little bit of effects again to make this a better title. Let's check our composition. So I brought in our little vase. So again, we're going to overlay it on the image. And as you can see, we're pretty good on the composition. We have a little bit of a bottom heavy, but we still have quite a bit on the sides and up top here. So it doesn't lean either way, right? And then we can even go as far as bring in the Fibonacci spiral, which these are actually plentiful on Canva, so we can find one of those. So as you can see, the dragon itself already follows it, so that's a great sign. And we can increase it. So that also looks pretty good. So this one follows all the things and will work really nicely. Let's also try the Fibonacci spiral here. Maybe we want it this way. Slightly different composition. We're going to put it this way. And we're actually going to make the title a little smaller. right? So it takes up this top box, and we're going to make the circle go down and be a little lower, right? So we're going to go this, we're going to move this a little lower, and move this with it. Right, so now we have a the kind of more Fibonacci spiral composition. This won't fit with the rule of thirds as much, but it'll still look nice. I don't really want to add the filigree to this one, as it'll make it far too busy. But we can, again, take a look at the composition, the weight, but as you can see, this is going to be very bottom heavy. There's a lot more on the bottom, so you can kind of predict that already. Now let's take a look at this one. Immediately, I think that this cover here would benefit from some filigree again. So I think not quite as complicated as the ones we used for the top, but maybe these more simple ones. And we can change the color to a black, right? So we can do this. Right? So already this is kind of creates a little bit more of a better foreground. This allows us to lower this, and then we're going to want to make this a little more tight. That seems to be a common issue with these. And this already looks pretty good as its own. It's pretty, honestly, quite striking. You have the offset of this. We can bring in the rule of thirds to line things up a bit more. So let's try this. Right, so I'm thinking we might want the kind of the middle of these to be through here. So maybe we can make this a little smaller and do this. Right, so it kind of like lines up like this a little bit. But that seems to make it a little too small. So if we want to keep the branch as the main imagery, oh, I seems to have lost my rule of thirds. So maybe we can see where it can line up on another third, right? So if we have it here, perhaps we can actually move it out a little bit, right? So then the kind of the middle sticks around here, right? And then we can adjust it like so. Right. So that's another option. And let's, for good measure, duplicate it, right? And say we don't like these at all. And maybe we want to use one of our dragons. So we can just do something like this, for example, which also looks really nice. Fantasy Lord, very, very striking cover. This would work perfectly, I think. Right, so there's another option. And we never really did get to use our lanterns, but that's okay. All right, maybe you can find another place to use them. Maybe they can go over here. You can also try this cover with the other filigree if you think that it would work better. So you can just, again, don't erase your work, right? Don't just start changing it right away. You want to save it, right? Because as you go, And I can already see, right, this is just too thin. It gets lost, right? So this isn't going to work. This is already working a lot better, right? So out of these ones, this one is still probably my favorite. My thing I dislike most about it is the title cover, right? So it works well enough here and here and even here, but in the in this top one, even though it's compositionally the best, this title looks kind of flat. So on we go, and I'm going to do another fast forward as I find something that looks a little better. And here's one that I found that I like a lot better. Right, so this kind of has that more Western fantasy feel to it, and it just looks a lot nicer. So we can finagle some things to line up, and we can go with this one, right? So let's see how much all of these cost. So what you're gonna want to do is you're gonna go into here. You're gonna press share, then download, and you're going to make sure that you're only downloading the page that you're currently on. So current page 1, you're going to click done, and then the free watermark draft will keep the draft, but you want to download it. And this right here will cost you $1, right? So very nice, simple looking cover, $1. This will get rid of all the watermarks that you see here, here, and here. If we want to try some of the other ones, this will probably be about the same. So let's try this other one, which I think is probably the close second best. So let's do again, share, download current page. We're good. And download, and this is $2, right? So you could download both covers for $4 to $5 together and be able to use them commercially as you see fit. Okay, so that would be it. Hopefully this is enough to show you that the sky is in fact the limit. You can absolutely create a cover that is clean, professional, shows the genre, and will attract readers. The key is to let your imagination run wild, then pare down by removing elements and picking the ones that fit together most. Less is more a lot of the time here. That is it for today. Press the notification bell and subscribe for more behind the scenes of self-publishing content, like author websites. Until next time.